host, Shawn Michael.
And I'm Party Johnnetty. And together, we are the PodRockers.
The PodRockers are recording BEP live from our Home Elite studios to bring you the PodRocker Nation, the very best in AEW wrestling commentary. And this week, we are bringing you a BEP House Show Wrestlers Spotlight. And this house show, we are featuring Kenny Omega.
Oh, yes, I am very excited about this one. The man who arguably is one of the best wrestlers currently in the sport of sports entertainment and professional wrestling.
Yeah, this is a guy that, I've heard his name, especially when I started watching a little bit of the Be the Elite, kind of saw this stuff kind of coming around, and Kenny Omega was a name that was being thrown around quite a bit. And as a very casual wrestling fan, that's about all I knew. And the only full matches I've seen is the most recent ones. And seeing his work in the ring is just amazing. I'm really excited to do a deep dive on what the legend of Kenny Omega is. And I've even got, I've driven through a town that he's wrestled in that I had no idea that I'm excited to talk about. But Party Johnnetty, why don't you give us a little bit of his pre-wrestling bio, if you will. What did Kenny do before he broke into the wrestling scene?
Oh man, so there's not much, honestly. I know as a kid he played hockey. He's from Canada, from Winnipeg area, and that's kind of a stereotype. But of course, yeah, he played hockey. I think he was a goalie actually, and he really just played hockey and watched wrestling. I knew he was a gamer a bit. He's always loved kind of that pop culture aspect of it, which we always nowadays see him correlate that with his characters. But yeah, before that, not too much besides, just doing the typical job and trying to make ends meet and whatnot. I know he has talked about it in interviews and whatnot. He had been picked on and bullied as a kid as well. And so he really didn't have too many, I don't know if he had a lot of friends or if he just didn't, he rubbed people the wrong way or something or other, but he found this and he kind of went forward with it, man. And so that's really it. He's not that old of a guy. He's currently 35. Around the same age as me. And so, yeah, once a wrestling fan, always a wrestling fan, I guess.
And I know, so he was in hockey. I don't remember if he made any kind of junior minors or anything like that, but was it injuries that he decided to go into wrestling, or just it was kind of all right, I got these two roads. I can keep doing this that I'm okay with, or I can go with this thing I'm passionate about. I'm going to go that direction. Oh,
man, I really couldn't tell you. I'm sure he's mentioned it in an interview. I know when he was wrestling in New Japan, he would do some great, they do these kind of behind the scenes kayfabe-esque interviews there. And he would do a ton of those. And that's kind of where I started to learn about Kenny Omega, the person, but also this whole idea of, keeping it, they're still kind of keeping it kayfabe. So Kenny's really good at that, mixing real life with make believe and, his gimmick. And so you don't know really what's real and what's not. There's a certain situation that we can get into, later on down when we visit pretty much his wrestling career.
Well, I think that's a great time to jump into that. So it's kind of interesting to look at what Kenny Omega's pre-AEW days were. So I kind of teased it a little bit, but there is a super, super tiny town that I drive throughout the summer in Missouri. It's Eldon, Missouri. And it's super small. It's near Lake of the Ozarks. And my father-in-law at one point, Mrs. Michael's dad, told me, he's like, oh my God, there's this wrestling school. And, whenever you hear that about a small town, I'm like, all right, is it a legit wrestling school or what's going on?
Yeah.
Because, I feel like it's kind of I don't know for sure, but wrestling schools, some of them I feel like could be like podcasting schools where it's somebody who's just going to take your money. But you have to do your research and know these people. And when I learned the name, and I don't know if it's a good school or not, but it's a person I've heard of. It's the Harley Race Wrestling School.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which to me sounds like it's a legendary name that I know of. So I'm like, that's got to be a pretty legit school.
Yeah, right.
And in researching Kenny Omega, I found out for about 9 days he was down in that area wrestling. So his grasp isn't just in Japan. He wrestled in a super small town in Eldon, Missouri, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Kenny's been around a bit. He has wrestled in quite a few areas. I know he started with Top Rope Championship Wrestling. I believe he actually trained with them first and kind of made his way through. But one thing that you see, Shawn, on the independent scene is a lot of guys will go to other schools, even though they've already gone to wrestling school. They'll try to go to other wrestling schools to try to pick up learning what they can and what they might not know. For instance, just with an MMA background, if a guy who's been training, well, now everyone just trains strictly MMA, but before that, when it was still training in individual martial arts, you'd go to a Muay Thai school and then you go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class and try to make yourself well-rounded. Even in the art of Muay Thai too, you would have different camps and different ideas. So in one camp, they might be a little bit faster in and out with the way that they train, whereas another camp would be hard-hitting and powerful. So they might move a little bit slower, but you get to see the hard-hitting effect with them. Whereas the other one was like, okay, we're going to go in and get out fast, as fast as you can. And so it still works for professional wrestling as well. I know around here, there's quite a few schools in the area, and it's not uncommon for the guys even to cross the border here to go to Canada and go to the Can-Am school and train around here, on top of going to the House of Truth Martini School, which is very reputable, and a few others as well, trying to just make yourself as well-rounded as possible.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you kind of probably learn a way to do it, and then if you kind of learn how other people have done it, like if you get in the ring, I'm assuming that it just makes it, because you could, okay, I know how this training went, I know how this guy kind of does this thing, so I can mold my style to it or tweak my stuff to work with that. Is that kind of the idea?
I mean, yeah, you want to, that's the thing, like you want to learn from those who kind of inspired you, even as you're watching tapes and whatnot. So sometimes, even if you're just in the local area of Michigan, you go, okay, well, I know I can go to these really great schools, but I also loved watching Shawn Michaels as a kid, and I know he has a school out in Texas. I think I'm going to go down there, and I feel like I'll be a little bit more inspired. I know Shawn doesn't, I don't know if he still has the school. I think he still does. I haven't checked out in a while. Booker T has a school. Even Seth Rollins has a school in Iowa. But you kind of get inspired by those guys, and you just want to make sure, well, you might feel that, hey, I might learn something from them, or I might get an idea of how they do this certain move so that I can then try to implement it and put it into my repertoire of moves. So try to make yourself as well-rounded as possible.
Makes sense. I mean, definitely not going to hurt any, but yeah, that's the only little bit I have tied to him, is that he kind of ran through my area, my neck of the woods. But I know you've followed him a lot closer. So what's kind of been his role before getting into AEW?
Yeah, so he actually did a lot of work for Premier Championship Wrestling, and he had quite a run there. And then he ended up actually going into WWE. And he did this in what was called at the time. So WWE has developmental territories, and this was even before NXT. They finally kind of came out with it and made it so that it's kind of their own thing now. But before that, WWE, it wasn't uncommon for WWE to have certain still territory areas, developmentals around the country that they would scope out. OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling, that was one that a lot of they used to scope out. Now that's kind of in Impact's area. And then you had Deep South Wrestling. And then I believe Deep South turned into Florida Championship Wrestling, or I could be wrong there. I don't know if they were parallel or something. But then, WWE was following FCW, and then they basically turned it into NXT, and now it's NXT. But Kenny had been working at Deep South Wrestling, actually, which was WWE's then developmental, And he was offered the developmental contract, and he was assigned to Deep South full time. And they actually, while Kenny was starting to become a free agent, WWE actually on the network put out one of their hidden gems. And it was actually a Kenny Omega match so that people would have an idea who Kenny Omega was, which is kind of crazy because why would WWE do that before they even signed the guy? And they never ended up signing him again. And he moved on to AEW. But before all that, he did work for WWE, but it was for Deep South, and he really didn't enjoy it. He actually did not like Bill DeMott, who has a lot of controversy behind his name. Bill DeMott, who was Hugh Morris in WCW, a lot of guys and gals didn't like him. He didn't like his way of coaching and teaching. Bill kind of was, I wouldn't even say old school, as he was just kind of mean and negative, at least allegedly. I wasn't there, obviously, so I can't say this. But from the stories, and I tend to believe the wrestlers, he would just do some ridiculous stuff. A lot of, what's the terminology I'm thinking of when you kind of do get into the hazing.
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
So Bill DeMott would do some weird hazing stuff, and so he didn't really like Bill, and he didn't like Bob Holly, and he ended up leaving, actually. And he returned back to Premier Championship Wrestling, and it's at this time that he starts making appearances elsewhere as well. He goes to Jersey All Pro Wrestling. We actually see him in Ring of Honor. And he had some great matches in Ring of Honor with Austin Aries and Daniel Bryan in WWE. And I believe it was Seth Rollins, actually, Tyler Black, in which there was a match where Daniel Bryan busts Kenny Omega open big time, throws an elbow and just connects, and Omega just starts bleeding. It was nasty. It was bad. But
that's been a party Johnnetty message from the beginning. Those elbows are dangerous.
Exactly. But yeah, we got to see Kenny get to compete with some of these guys that are now big names in WWE. And then he ends up going into DDT Pro Wrestling, and DDT is a part of Japan. He was captivated by a Japanese wrestler called Kota Ibushi. And you might know of Kota Ibushi if you've watched the Cruiserweight Classic on the WWE Network. He made an appearance there. If you watched New Japan, you definitely know him. If you watched old DDT, you definitely know him. Now, DDT wrestling is kind of a not so serious wrestling. It's comedic. And this is where, at the time, you might have been online on the internet, and then you'd see in random like Reddit threads or something, a dude wrestling like a blow-up doll, a dude wrestling by himself, an invisible man. You even saw a guy wrestling a small child, and that guy was Kenny Omega. And
I saw that match, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people who had no clue who, what, where, and why, but they know that. They've seen it. They're like, oh yeah, I've seen the blow-up doll Canadian Destroyer thing, and DDT was pretty hilarious and still is. They have some good stuff that's going on there, and Kenny Omega wanted to be a part of that. There's actually, I know going on later we'll recommend some matches, but Kenny Omega actually made a wrestling match, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of his opponent, but he wrestled a guy in Canada, actually, and they had this kind of hardcore match, and it's absolutely hilarious. Kenny goes into the guy's cabin. He's sitting there playing Super Nintendo, and Kenny challenges him basically on 24/7 rules. The guy's like, he pauses his game, and then a comedic match ensues. And they just had a great, fun match. And it's on YouTube, and you can see it. And I'm sure if you type in like Kenny Omega intro DDT match or invitation or something. But that was kind of like his calling out to DDT that he wanted to wrestle there. And he wanted to wrestle with Kota Ibushi. And then on top of that, not only does he start wrestling with DDT, but he kind of comes up with this storyline with Kota Ibushi where Ibushi and him wrestle each other, and I believe Ibushi ends up kind of getting the best of him. I don't know if Kenny ever really beat him in DDT, but they end up forming a tag team called the Golden Lovers, which they end up bringing into New Japan later on, but they won the KOD Tag Team Championships, and they just had this hilarious kind of back and forth. They had this really big bromance, but it was underlying relationship. So
okay,
it was more than a bromance. And they played this up for basically 10 years almost, or, maybe it was 10 years, a little bit over 10 years now that I think about it. And they really got to this point in New Japan that Kenny and Kota were doing this storyline that was basically just them, and you wouldn't have noticed it. It's almost like when you read a Stephen King novel and then you read another one and then you're like, holy shit, there's some underlying tones here. There's more going on in these books than just the single book. And their storyline was kind of like that. Even though they were in DDT and then New Japan, that storyline with them still continued. And sometimes that really doesn't happen because wrestling promotions don't want to continue a storyline that they didn't create. But Kenny and Kota had this great storyline going, this kind of lovers quarrel, and then they finally reunite in New Japan, and it's awesome. But yeah, so Kenny had a great run in DDT. There's tons of matches you can watch with him on YouTube as well. He also makes a stint in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, PWG. That's where you see the Young Bucks as well. And he has some great fun fights with El Generico. There's Colt Cabana, the Young Bucks, Kevin Steen, Joey Ryan. The names keep continuing. So his stuff with PWG's out there on YouTube as well. And then he gets into New Japan Pro Wrestling in 2010. And he goes in with Kota. And then I don't know if he left or he was around with the Best of the Super Juniors. And then he really starts to make a name for himself with the Bullet Club. And Kenny comes back full-time. Well, he joins New Japan full-time once his DDT contract expired at the end of 2014. And then it was 2015, and I have to correct myself because I know in the other episode I thought it was 2016, but I got my dates mixed up. It was 2015, the beginning of 2015. He wrestles his first match as a member of the Bullet Club, and he wins the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship for the first time there, and he had a great run with it. And then, he really ends up going big time with Bullet Club in New Japan. After a while there, AJ Styles leaves, and it's Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks that kick AJ Styles out of the group. They turn on him, beat him up, and he's gone. And then, he's in WWE. But yeah, so they do that. And then we have that little bit of dissension from the Bullet Club. I know we kind of talked about that too, where we started seeing the elite group being the elites. They start kind of branching off. There's a bit of a mess going on. Kenny actually is the first Gaijin to win the tournament in New Japan, and Kenny also gets the title there. And then he basically has a great series of matches with Okada. And then he confirms that he's leaving New Japan back at the end of 2018. And he joins All Elite Wrestling. There was still speculation, even though people thought, he's for sure joining All Elite. There was still speculation that he would join WWE. He got offers to join WWE, I think WWE even thought he was going to join. It sounded like there was rumors that he wouldn't even be on the NXT. They would have moved him up to the main show, the main roster, and he wouldn't have to worry. He had said that he was a little worried about creative control, which is understandable. And he ultimately decided to choose All Elite. And that really is a huge nutshell. We could spend a highlight time talking about his New Japan run and everything that happened there. His 3 matches with Okada are absolutely awesome. And they basically are the pinnacle on the Dave Meltzer rating scale. That was really, I think, the first match besides, so Meltzer had said in the past that like a Ric Flair Dragon Steamboat, if he could have rated it more than 5 stars, he would have, but he never did. And this was the first time actually ever with Omega Okada that he rated it like 6 stars. And then the next match, he was like, it's off the charts. It's like 6 3/4 quarters. He just said these were the best matches ever. So that stuff, definitely you're going to want to look up all that as well. So, and now he's in All Elite, and that's where a lot of people are coming in to see him. So not only do you get to see Kenny, originally like Kenny adopted this kind of like surfer-esque gimmick, but he realized he went with what worked for him, and he kind of went into the geek pop culture side with the video games and everything. He's a huge Street Fighter fan, and he plays competitively as well outside of that. That's why we saw the Fighter Fest thing with CEO. And yeah, he's a big gamer, and then he is great at kayfabe as well, because this ongoing storyline for 10 years with Kota Ibushi. You know, he'd even mention in some of his like interviews and stuff, and even on Being the Elite, like he would make references to being bisexual and whatnot. And people didn't know if that's the character or if that's real life. And so for a little bit there too, he was kind of getting a following in the gay community. And I'm not saying that as a joke because of the AJ Styles thing, but it was legitimate. Like there was a lot of people in the LGBTQIA, I believe now, the people were very happy to see that there was, at least if Kenny wasn't bisexual in real life, at least his character was, and he wasn't afraid to say stuff like that. So, you know, they made mention, like there was one interview about someone said that she interviewed him and was like, oh, you know, what would be the perfect date with a woman or something like that. And he was like, well, a perfect date with either sexes would be, you know, he kind of corrected her. And, you know, in the Being a Little Late, he comes out and says in like one episode, he's like, I think he says, does Marty know I'm bisexual? But then like they all break character and start laughing. And so it's really kind of up in the air. You can see some threads where people talk about whether or not he is or not, but, either way, it seems like it got a lot of praise from people to be like, hey, at least there's even if it's your character, at least you're showcasing that it's kind of like, this is real. So that's it in a nutshell, man. I mean, there's so much more on Kenny Omega than just that, but that kind of gives you a brief idea who this guy is.
Well, I know like you're talking about his like relationship status. I don't know if it was a beating lead or what I heard it from, but I know like there's no, at least like on his wiki and stuff, usually it's like if somebody's in a relationship with somebody, you'd see like, oh, they're with this person or was with this person. And he doesn't have any of that kind of stuff anywhere. And I thought I had read somewhere that was basically he just didn't have time for it. He just wanted to be dealing with wrestling, so he just didn't have time to have any kind of relationships. Now, again, is that because it's part of his gimmick, or is that just actually, you know, he's too focused on wrestling and living this life that he just doesn't have time to devote to a relationship, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, right. I think it's a little bit of A and B, honestly. You see some guys that are honest about that. I know like John Cena, for instance, said he never wanted kids because of he thought it was unfair for the life that he lives, that he would never get to see his children, and he didn't want his kids to not have a dad. So he just refrained from it. But yeah, a little bit, I think it's hard having a family, to be on the road, a lot of guys will tell you that's the hardest part of it. Whether you have a wife, a girlfriend at home, a boyfriend, kids, family, that's the tough thing, because you're on the road a majority of the time. You hardly get to see them. I couldn't imagine it, man.
Oh, it'd be tough. And especially like with these guys, they're going all over the place, going to different promotions. I mean, you don't know where you're going to be, probably 6 months out of the year. You're kind of, planning that far ahead. So,
yeah, right.
It's got to be tough.
Yeah.
What I find interesting, though, is like he they mentioned in the last shows, like a lot of people haven't seen much of his stuff, like stateside, because he spent most of his time in Japan.
Yeah.
Do you know why he decided to kind of push most of his focus in Japan? Because I know even in the early being Be the Elites, it's a lot of the Bucks are in the States, and they're like, oh, we're going back to Japan to see Omega.
Yeah.
It's not as much as like he's coming back to the States with them, hardly at all. Do you know why he kind of decided to put a lot of his focus in Japan?
I think honestly, he's just him being a fan of anime and video games, and him falling in love with the culture. I think he just realized that he wanted to stay there, and so it kind of was like a second home away from home for him. And I don't know if it was just he got to the point where he was doing such big things in Japan that they finally signed him full time. I think that, and maybe I'm blending kayfabe right now, but there might have been a part where he always kind of wanted to go full time with New Japan, but they kept kind of pushing him around and whatnot. And then it finally happened. And then I think he kind of said, hey, if I go full time with you guys, then I'll stay here. And so he's always just been there. I always wondered that too. I was like, Kenny Omega could make just a lot of money, just like the Bucks, if he went around and he did all this stuff. And I mean, he did for a while there, but he stayed with New Japan, and apparently the contract was pretty good. I know there was I don't know if there was a non-compete clause in his contract, whereas the Bucks could go wherever. But I know, I think Kenny actually said in an interview or whatnot that he made sure that it was strictly New Japan. And he felt a big loyalty to them as well, because they took him, they signed him, and were really great with him. And so he's just kind of, like I said, it's like his home away from home, I guess. Or maybe he considers Japan his home now, and Canada his home away from home. I know he still has a home in Canada, which you can see on Being the Elite and whatnot. And I think it might be actually the same like little cabin house area when he first originally did that DDT
Oh, that's
match.
awesome.
So yeah, he's I don't know, man. He just seems to really enjoy Japan and everything that it is. He's actually fluent in Japanese as well. And I know that people had asked him, how'd you learn Japanese so fast? And he basically said he would listen to the other wrestlers, pick up on the catchphrases and whatnot. Like wrestlers would tell him what's kind of the easy catchphrases. And then it went from there. And so I think the fans in Japan had a big, deep respect for him being able to pick up their language and talk in Japanese to them. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like you think about like a lot of the Japanese baseball players that come to the States. Basically, I think the way they've always said with them is, what you learn first is the curse word and the inappropriate phrases.
Yeah, right.
And then you kind of build from there, because it's kind of that locker room kind of mentality in sports. And I would imagine wrestling locker rooms are probably pretty similar. I'm not sure, but it would seem like there's just that mentality.
So I have to say, apparently, on February 14th of this year, Kenny Omega actually obtained Japanese citizenship.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, I don't know if he's dual. Well, he's probably dual citizen since Canada allows that. But, yeah, so now he's a Japanese citizen.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, so that makes sense. He probably feels like he's part of that country. I mean, obviously now he's a citizen, so yeah. I always think it's kind of interesting, too, with a guy like that. Like, he's, watching his matches, too, like, he feels like you said, he's like one of the best, if not the best wrestler I've seen in quite a while. He has like all like the 5 points that you'd want with a wrestler.
Yeah, man.
And like WWE's calling him. And I remember hearing the Bucks, and again, this might have just been kind of shooting, stuff up somebody's dress or skirt or whatever. But it was the idea that the Bucks and Omega were in a hotel room with WWE contracts and the AEW contract, and they're like, which one do we want to do? Before they finally decided on the AEW, which wasn't even a guarantee thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you just think if like the Bucks or Omega decided to go to WWE, it kind of changes the whole dynamic of how AEW is established right now, in my opinion.
Oh yeah. There wouldn't be an AEW. Like, I mean, Kenny on the one hand, sure, they could still do an AEW without him. It would be really tough for them because Kenny is such a top star. He's almost like, dare I say, Sting in a way, where even though Kenny, okay, like technically he wrestled for WWE, but he wrestled in the developmental. But like Sting was always a WCW guy, and it took forever for Sting to finally go into WWE. And it's almost kind of the same way, like AEW, Kenny going to AEW. Just, I don't know, there feels like there's something about it. It feels different. That if Kenny would have went to WWE, I mean, that would have been tough. That would have been tough on AEW. He has a lot of draw power. He has a lot of power in his name. People love him. And I think one of the things, too, that some people really can relate with him on and like him about is that he actually is drug-free. Like he abstains from alcohol and tobacco and any sort of drug use too. So he's like a clean living dude that loves anime and video games and action movies. He's kind of like your typical dude. And he just has this fan base of people that like him. And not only that, but he's also very, very talented in the ring. So adding that, the dude's just an all-around complete package.
Yeah, I think that Sting comparison's a really good one because, he was in Japan, decides to come to AEW. Now, let's say, hypothetically, AEW folds in 5 years. I feel like he'd do like a Sting thing. He would go back to Japan. Like, he wouldn't go to the WWE.
Yeah.
Like, even when WCW folded, I think they offered Sting, like, I don't know if it was like $1 on every $100 for the contract to buy him out, but he's like, no, I'm riding this contract out and I'm not wrestling.
Yeah,
because
man.
he just did not want to go to WWF, and then decided to do like was it TNA and Impact and like all the other stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that was it. He went over to TNA, and then it wasn't until, and it depends on who you talk to, but apparently it was Triple H that was the one who reached out to him and really convinced Sting to come over. But I know we're not doing a spotlight on Sting, although it'd be kind of cool to see Sting show up in AEW.
That'd be awesome.
Just not to wrestle, but, to actually just see him there. But anyway.
They just have him in the rafters.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just looking down. But no,
I think it's a good comparison.
Yeah. I think I agree with you. If this folds up, and even I believe in his Kenny Omega's contract too with AEW, that he actually has it where he can still wrestle in Japan if he chose to. He could still wrestle for New Japan if either New Japan wanted him or he wanted to. But it seems like the relations are strained right now with New Japan. I know with the whole Moxley situation, Moxley's their United States champion, and yet he can't wrestle for New Japan in the United States. So that's a little goofy, but that's because AEW said you can't. And I don't know. So things seem a little strained there. And I don't think we'll see Kenny Omega in New Japan while he's in AEW until things might cool down, which I think they should. But we'll see how it goes.
Well, as we're going through this too, so I'm kind of curious, like, we talked a little bit about the Young Bucks, but Kenny Omega, what's some of his, I know he's got a really great ending that he does for shows, but what's some of his signature moves, chants, and things that he's known for?
Oh, yeah. Well, obviously everyone knows him as his goodbye and mwah, good night, bang. Or he also does boing, at Fight for the Fallen. It's understandable. But he's got the one-winged angel, which a lot of people love. And the great thing about Kenny is he's just kind of like over the top with this stuff. He was known as the sweeper when he was in Bullet Club. So he would actually come out with a broom and he would sweep to his song. And it was absolutely hilarious. He's very loud and vocal in the ring. He does, he does a bunch of different things, like his move wise. He's got the V trigger. He loves his knees, as you could see. So he's absolutely insane, man. I mean, the dude does a great. He does the Tiger Driver, and he does Dragon Suplex. He just does a lot, man, and. It's almost like just go to YouTube, type in Kenny Omega highlight reel, and you will just see the amazing stuff that comes out of him. He one time with Kota Ibushi, they did a crazy Hurricane Rana off the top rope onto the floor, not onto the wrestling ring, onto the floor. And it was absolutely insane. I mean, does he do that all the time? No, but he does some insane stuff. As you saw, the Jericho, the flip onto the Canadian table, like I like to call it. He did that crazy knee spot with Shima the last show. I mean, he does knees, suplexes, just everything, man. And he's just terrific all around. Very hard hitting, kind of that strong style, but also comedic and whatnot. The guy knows how to have a comedy match. He knows how to have a serious match. He knows how to tell a story in any genre.
Well, it's like I said, I don't know a ton about him, but I do know how to read Wikipedia. So I will read through some of his championships, and he's got a ton of them. So for Forefront Wrestling, he was their junior heavyweight champion. All Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, he was the world junior heavyweight champion. Canadian Wrestling Elite, he was the tag team championship. He won the tag team tournament as well. In the Canadian Wrestling Federation, he was the heavyweight champion. CBS Sports had him as the match of the year in 2018 with Okada, which I think there's a bunch of different best wrestling match of the year that I think like 16, 17, 18, him and Okada won each year, which was awesome.
Yeah,
you mentioned some of the DDT stuff. Japan All Pro Wrestling, he's the heavyweight champion, light heavyweight champion. National Wrestling Alliance, he was the NWA Canadian X champion. Let's see what else we got here. So, like you said, the PWG was the world champion there. Battle of Los Angeles in 2009. In Pro Wrestling Illustrated, this is what I was kind of mentioning, he was the #1 singles wrestler in 2018. And then in 17-18, it was the match of the year with Okada. And then feud of the year in 2017 with Okada. He actually had in Ring of Honor was the feud of the year with Cody. And then, so with the Wrestling Observer newsletter, so best wrestling maneuver in 16, 17, and 18 for his one-winged angel. Feud of the year with Okada in 17. Japanese MVP in 18. Most outstanding wrestler in 2018. Match of the year, 17 and 18 with Okada. And he was the wrestler of the year for 2018.
Nice, man.
And the one thing that I thought was interesting, too, is he was the first, you said, to win that G1 climax.
Yes.
So do you have a little bit more information for somebody who's a little bit more novice and or just starting to understand what does that mean?
So the G1 Climax is an amazing like bracket tournament event that happens in New Japan. And it's just chock full of talented wrestlers, and there's story and history behind it. New Japan has done some great stuff that's available on YouTube that you can check it out to learn more about the G1 Climax and its winners and whatnot. But you see throughout this long list of winners, I mean, these are names that Western wrestling fans, hardcore fans definitely know. I would even argue that some kind of, now I want to say like hardcore, but pretty big wrestling fans, I would say they would know some of these names. But there's just this like list of who's who in Japanese wrestling has won this tournament. And they've also, they've done a cool little thing on the IWGP heavyweight belt too. That very similar as well. Cool to check that out. But a gaijin, who is basically a foreigner in Japan, that's kind of the word that they use, has never won the tournament until Kenny Omega. There's been times where it was close, but it never happened. And actually, I think, was it Carl Anderson made it to the semifinals? But he didn't get to win. He was getting a good push in New Japan as well back in the day, but no, they really, no one had ever done it. So to have Kenny, who was outside of Japan, win it was pretty big news just all around. So that tournament is usually just an amazing, fun days full of entertainment, and there's always hard-hitting action. There's usually almost every match is always great to watch. And they just have some fun stuff that goes on with it. If you love Japanese wrestling, that's one that you look forward to every year. And it was just cool to see that Kenny finally was popular enough where at the time I remember it happening too, like us being going, is this really going to happen? Is he going to win it? And
now, I know it's going on right now, and Moxley, I think, is 5-0 right now in the tournament.
Yeah, it is going on right now, and I hate to say I haven't really kept up with it as much as I used to, but I mean, it's a tournament that you don't want to miss. Like, if you can watch it, totally watch it. New Japan's their streaming service is pretty cheap. I think it's actually cheaper than the WWE, depending on if the Japanese yen is weaker than the dollar at the moment. And you pay about, like, when I had the streaming services, like $8.99 a month. So I actually loved it. Just didn't have enough time to keep watching.
So do you think? I know, like, Moxley's kind of the hot thing right now. Do you think they will give him a push to win, or do you think that's
no?
Can you?
I mean, I'm sure he'll go far and whatnot, but I don't think he'll win it. Just because the fact that Moxley is kind of mostly AEW, and I think that would just make it look better for AEW than it would for New Japan. So I doubt that he'll win it. I'll be surprised if he wins it, I should just say. So who will win it? I honestly don't know. Ever since, probably late 2018, I just haven't really kept up nearly enough with New Japan as I used to. And I mean, that's partially because I started getting more and more into the, obviously AEW, but, you know, besides that, getting really busy. So haven't had the time to really check out all my wrestling outside of kind of the main ones.
Well, as we're getting kind of down to the wire on this, I always like to hear kind of like, if you mentioned a few of them, but if you had to give these kind of 5-star matches, the matches that if you want to, you know, like let's just say like 4 or 5, if you want to say check out these Kenny Omega matches, what would be the handful you would send somebody to?
Oh man, you really can't go wrong, dude. If you want to watch comedy with Kenny, definitely check out his DDT stuff. Check out that it's a fun little, it might be 10 to 15 minutes match on YouTube of him. It was his audition tape to DDT. Check that out. That's fun. You gotta, check out his tag work with Kota Ibushi. I mean, just pick a match. They've had some great ones. His match with Naito in 2016. Awesome. Check that out. His matches with Okada, you gotta check those out. You want to see wrestling? I mean, these are a work of art. And I know a lot of people, like, when you hear stuff like that, you go, oh, geez, yeah, right. It's not that good. But then you watch it and you go, oh my gosh, I felt like I watched wrestling, the history of wrestling in those matches.
That's
as
awesome.
Weird as it had everything, man. And that's just on top of a great story. The Okada series of matches is just fun. If you are strapped on time and you can't watch all these matches, just watch the Okada matches and you'll see how great those are. I mean, he's had some bangers, man. I mean, check out his PWG stuff. But yeah, if you put a gun to my head, obviously I say you got to watch his Okada stuff.
All right. Well, so Great spotlight on Kenny Omega. So as we're kind of tidying up this episode, let's do a little bit of under the ring news, and we'll kind of get back into our AEW information, AEW stuff. But so this week they had a Road to All Out where we got to see the Shawn Spears interview.
Yes.
And the first piece of this Road to All Out, what I'm excited for, is we get Tony Schiavone back in the AEW control room, which
Yes.
I love, like, that's the thing I loved growing up. You had like the blast off and all these things where you just had somebody kind of do it like it was sports stuff, going over the highlights, giving you the down and dirty. And I love Tony Schiavone's voice. Like WCW, that kind of stuff back in the day, I loved it. I've been listening to his What Happened When podcast.
Yeah.
And he kind of goes back through a lot of that stuff. And so getting him in there was really awesome. What was your thoughts about seeing Tony Schiavone back in kind of the spotlight?
Oh, I loved it, man. I just love seeing him. I've always loved him on commentary. I think at the time, because there was such great wrestling going on at the time, and there was great commentary on both sides, a lot of people shat on Tony Schiavone. And it wasn't until kind of later on that people realized who, how good he was. And I know he always got flack for the Yeti thing, which everyone kind of knows about, and he also got flack for the Mick Foley's your champion, that'll put butts in seats.
Yeah.
But that wasn't him though. He was told to say that. And, I just absolutely, the dude just is a professional all around. I love that he's very humble. He's down to earth. He does minor league baseball announcing and whatnot too, in commentary. He also was like, hey, yeah, I'm a manager at Starbucks. He's like, I wanted to see what it felt like to actually start getting into the business side of things, to do something a little bit different. So I decided to do this. And you got to give it to him, man. Like, he's still out there working, still doing his thing. But to see him back in there, like, it put a smile on my face.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. It's like I said, that What Happened When, if you get a chance, listen to a few of those episodes. It's awesome. He's got like the thing whenever they talk about scenes, like, it's Sting!
Yeah.
Always makes me giggle. But also on the Road to All Out, we get the Shawn Spears interview about why he attacked Cody Rhodes. I thought it was a really good interview. I feel like it felt a little bit more like a conversation. So JR, I know he used to be the king of doing these things. I felt like he was I felt like he struggled with it a little bit. Like, it's not anything bad. Like, you're definitely in the interview, you're looking more for the Shawn Spears side of it. But that I kind of noticed a little bit lacking a little. But the thing that, again, like, I'm trying to figure a lot of this stuff out. What do you know about the guy that came in with Shawn Spears, Tully?
Oh, man. All right. So, okay. So first off, just to give you, I really liked the Shawn Spears interview. I thought Shawn came off awesome. I'm really excited to look forward with how that's going to go. Yeah, I kind of wanted more from JR, but you know what? I do like that it's different it wasn't just a copy paste from WWE, but I kind of wanted more. That's there I go again, trademark Johnnetty. But when I saw Tully Blanchard, it totally made up for everything. Tully is a Hall of Famer. I mean, those who saw Tully, who have watched wrestling, they know Tully Blanchard. And it's awesome to be able to tell you this, like to be like, oh man, I get to explain who Tully Blanchard is to you. Tully Blanchard was one of the Four Horsemen. And you had Tully, you had Ric Flair, and Arn Anderson, and Ole Anderson. And Tully and Arn had gone on and they did some tag team wrestling as well, the Brain Busters. And Tully has just a reputation and a name for himself behind just the Four Horsemen in general. Like this South Wrestling, Tully back in the day, he was just a very talented wrestler in his own right. The fact that he was a part of the Four Horsemen also is drawing power to have Tully show up and to be behind Shawn Spears. is pretty damn cool. And so when I saw that, I was happy. I liked what it could possibly lead up to. So who knows where that's going to go, but I'm happy with it. He's kind of almost like, so the Four Horsemen also had a manager, James J. Dillon. And so I feel like JJ Dillon, like totally is going to be JJ Dillon for Shawn Spears. It's a possibility. I don't know, but I hope he's also Tully.
So do you think this will lead AEW kind of into more stables and things like that? Like this is kind of them laying the groundwork for it, or do you think it's just him and Shawn?
I think it's just him and Shawn. And you know what? I don't know. I think it's almost like what Paul Ellering did when he came back to NXT. I really like that. I'm a huge manager guy. I loved Paul Ellering when he was with the Road Warriors or the Legion of Doom or whatever you want to call them, Hawk and Animal. And to see Tully kind of take the role of a manager now has me excited. So we'll see. We'll see how it all goes. Who knows? There might be a possibility of a stable, but for now, I think it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. The whole idea of Tully and the Four Horsemen kind of being rivals of Dusty Rhodes as well, Cody's father. That's really cool because there's a ton of history
playing on that. Playing on that history a little bit.
Yeah. So I really like that. You know, I mean, if they could get is Arn Anderson now at backstage with AEW? Is he doing backstage stuff with them?
Oh, that's a good question.
I can't remember.
Wasn't he with WWE for a little bit though, doing some backstage work there?
He was, and so was Tully. Actually, Tully was doing some work as a producer for WWE, and I don't know when he left. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it sounds like he was released this year. So this is just from the Wikipedia because he's basically starting a podcast with the wrestling podcaster Conrad Thompson. He revealed on May 24th that he'd be starting a podcast with Conrad.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if it's out yet or not, but yeah, I guess he left around first of the year, earlier this year.
Yeah, because I mean, just recently they were put into the WWE Hall of Fame as the Four Horsemen.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I should have looked up a little further. In February 22nd, Anderson was fired from the WWE. So he's a free agent.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, gosh, it would be a good grab for them if they got Arn. Arn's a wealth of knowledge too. I wouldn't be surprised if Arn's in there. We'll see. It feels, man, it's so weird how AEW feels like just wrestling in the South again, and WCW, and like even before that, territory days. It's cool, and I mean, obviously they got to learn from the mistakes of the past and whatnot, but I don't know. It gets me excited about it. The great thing about just AEW in general is the fact of the different talents coming together to try to make something of it. So who knows? Gosh, what was it? Just trying to find, I guess it was 2012 that the Horsemen got inducted into WWE. I thought it was later.
Why was it that long ago?
But yeah, because Ric Flair got inducted on his own, and then the Horsemen, I think it went that way. I think Flair got inducted first, and then the Horsemen got inducted. That's what made me think that they got inducted like in 2016. But time flies, man. Time flies when you're watching wrestling.
Well, as we're still in the ring, Being the Elite obviously came out. And the only thing we got out of this, I think we got a little bit extra of what was going to be talked about at the end of Fight for the Fallen that got cut short. But we saw that the Young Bucks and the Brotherhood have made up. They're now together and friends again, sharing pizza.
I was just going to say sharing pizza. Actually, literally sharing pizza with one another, taking bites out of the same slice.
Yeah. And like there was two pieces there. They clearly could have broke it and ate it, but no, it's like we're going to eat both these pieces together.
Yep, exactly.
So I thought that was pretty exciting. But so breaking kayfabe, what we have, we got a couple of great signings I thought was interesting. I don't know if you saw the video of MJF signing his multi-year extension.
No.
You have to look it up because it's hilarious. Because, it's MJF, so he does everything in character. I don't know who it is. It's a lady that walks up with a piece of paper and a pen and hands it to him. He's on his phone. He's like, oh, what? Oh, I'm sorry. Don't worry. Don't be nervous. I get this all the time. He pulls it out like he's getting ready to sign her boobs. He's like, what's your name? He's like, what's your name, cutie? And then she puts the paper down. He's like, oh, yeah, the signing. Oh, yeah, okay, let me do that. So he has signed a multi-year extension with AEW. So he'll be with the company for an extended amount of time, which I think is a good signing. Like I think in the 3 shows he's been in, they've all he's stolen the spotlight from most of them.
Oh yeah.
And then a signing that's kind of we talked about kind of a AEW versus WWE piece, and this has happened a couple of weeks ago. But Eric Bischoff, who does a podcast called 83 Weeks, former WCW head, is now going to take lead on SmackDown.
Yeah, but he's not going to have any, he's not going to be part of creative on SmackDown, apparently. So if anyone's listening and they think that he's going to do that, no, he's just, he's taking the lead of the show. I think he's an executive producer or whatnot on the show.
You think that's just a hire him so he doesn't go to AEW kind of thing? Mm-hmm. Or you think he's going to be able to provide value?
Both. Bischoff's really good on the side of TV. And I know he gets flack for his WCW stuff and then for his TNA stuff, but Bischoff is a smart guy and he knows TV. He also does stuff with reality TV, and a lot of people don't know that. So I think it was both a grab for, hey, we know Bischoff is great, and we don't want to give AEW the chance to even get Bischoff.
Yeah, if you get a chance, I know I've been pushing other podcasts, but 83 Weeks is really interesting because he does talk about WCW was never making money, but the problem was, and Tony Schiavone talks about it too, that their biggest failure to them wasn't the company or the organization, it was the fact that they were owned by a TV channel. Yeah. So they didn't get any kind of revenue from the show. Like that stuff went to, TBS and TNT. And, how they would work money is they would cut money from them. Of course, this could be sour grapes. I don't know. But it seemed like they really kind of used WCW to hemorrhage money. So, we need to buy 10 cameras for something else. All right, we'll put it on the WCW budget.
Yeah, right.
So it's, with AEW now, they're their own company and they're getting paid to be on TNT. So hopefully that's one mistake for sure that they're learning from.
Yeah.
But all right, well, as always, we have a From the Stand segment. So letters and feedback from everybody out there, the PodRocker Nation, would love to hear that from you guys. We also have our gimmick segment where you guys can put in your gimmicks, cut us a promo, send it our way. You can record your voice and send it us to podrockers@beelite.com. All right, John. Well, what do we have coming up next?
All right. Our next episode, we will be reviewing All In, which took place September 1st, 2018, from the Hoffman's Estate, Illinois, at the Sears Center Arena.
You could say this is the seed that started this growth of AEW. It wasn't an AEW event,
no,
but it really was kind of the table setter for it.
Yep, exactly. It was a show that a bunch of really popular independent guys said, hey, let's see if we can do something for independent wrestling. And they did, with the help of Ring of Honor and a few others. They were able to do this. And I can't wait to talk about it.
All right, PodRocker Nation, you can reach out to BEP by following us on Twitter @BElitePod and on Instagram @BElitePodcast. Email questions, comments, or your lovely, lovely promos to podrockers@BeElite.com. And you can also like us on Facebook by searching for Be Elite Pod.
Well, we are desperately out of time for this week's Be Elite Pod. But until next week, I'm Party Johnnetty.
And I'm Shawn Michaels saying so long from our BEP Home Elite Studios.
And remember, get off the street and be elite.